Hello, healers. My name is Ben, and this is the Moss Report. I'm here today with my father, author and founder of the Moss Report, Dr. Ralph W. Moss. Good morning, Dad.
Good morning, Ben.
So I understand that today you would like to talk with us about the topic of avocados. An interesting subject. I am eager to learn more. And what do you have to share with us?
Well, a paper came out recently in a very good journal, Cancer Prevention Research, and the authors are totally reputable. They're all associated with the Harvard Chan School of Public Health in Boston, and a famous group of people, really among the top researchers in the topic of food and cancer in the world. So we have no reason to doubt the integrity and the skill of these authors. And in my opinion, it's a beautifully put together paper in every way.
Okay. You found this paper and it relates to avocados and specifically cancer?
Correct.
Okay. Prospective study of avocado consumption and cancer risk in U.S. men and women. What does that mean, prospective study?
It means that they started the study before people had developed cancer. So they looked at the diets of the people as time went by and then saw who got cancer and which kinds of cancer. At the end of the study, they were able to say, not that avocados caused or didn't cause cancer to occur, but that it was associated with certain rates of cancer in different populations.
So in this study, they did these surveys specifically to look at the cancer rates among people who either ate or didn't eat avocados in their diet? Is that how that works?
Correct. Every few years, they gave them a questionnaire to see how many avocados they were eating. The studies encompass a great many different foods and lifestyle modifications and so forth. This is the avocado portion of these huge studies that were conducted at Harvard over a period of decades.
So we'll put a link to this paper in the description. Is it freely available?
The abstract is freely available, and that has a lot of the data that people will need. If you want to go into it more deeply, you have to pay to see it.
So what did they find in this study?
So men who ate more than one portion per week of avocados had 15% fewer incidents of cancer than men who didn't eat avocados. And in 3 common kinds of cancer, it was about a 30% decrease.
Wow. 15% fewer incidences of cancer across the board in the population group that ate avocados.
Right. And it was only one portion. A portion is half an avocado or half a cup of avocado.
A week?
A week. And the incidence of lung, colon, and bladder cancer was about 30% decrease.
That's astonishing.
And amazingly, this paper hasn't gotten very much publicity at all.
I don't know what to say. I feel like I'm going to be eating more avocados. I'm going to be taking my medicine in the form of an avocado.
But now comes the weird part.
Okay.
The weird part is there was no reduction in cancer overall among women.
Huh. That is weird.
And there actually was an increased incidence of breast cancer among women.
No. Really? More?
A 21% increase among women.
From eating avocados?
We can't say from eating, because these are not causative things. These are just associations. In other words, if you are the kind of person who eats more than one avocado a week, you will not get the benefit in terms of breast cancer. In fact, there was about a 21% increase, and it was especially seen in estrogen receptor negative cancers, but also in ER positive or estrogen receptor positive cancers. And that's very disturbing, and especially in older women.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they really were able to look at that demographic with that much granular detail that they could see based on age range.
Oh, yeah, they look at all those things. They look at everything that they can think of, and they couldn't figure it out why this was happening. So they reran the same type of study in another very large group of younger women.
Okay.
And then
they reran it.
They reran the whole thing, but this time, instead of postmenopausal or older women, they did it primarily in premenopausal or younger women. They had another database that they could analyze. And then the pro-cancer effect, if you will, disappeared in the younger women.
Huh.
Ooh. And they're as confused as we are about what's causing this.
Yeah, that's a real head scratcher. And, a huge red flag for postmenopausal women. If you're eating a lot of these avocados, that's probably not advisable based on this study.
It's one study, admittedly, even though it is from the premier group in the United States for doing these kinds of studies. They themselves in the paper sort of indicate that this might be an artifact, meaning there weren't that many women who were eating avocados in the group, and there weren't that many women getting breast cancer in the follow-up. So they're not sure what's causing this association, but they raised the possibility that this was simply too few people to be able to come up with a meaningful difference.
Right. Well, I don't know what to say about that. I'm married to a woman who is in that demographic that could be adversely affected, and she loves avocados. And I am now nervous about them, and I don't know if I should be advising her, whether her takeaway from our conversation should be that she shouldn't consume them. I would think probably I would say that she shouldn't, based on this study. As you've said, it's from a very reputable journal. The authors couldn't be at a higher level of reputability out of Harvard and these types of almost impeccably diligent and accurate science centers. That's really not good news. I mean, it's good news for men. How unfair is that? It's good for men, but not for women above menopausal age.
Right.
Very interesting. Well, so they don't go into why they think that might be. You have any thoughts about that?
I have a theory.
Okay.
But it's just a theory. And that is, there's an awful lot of pesticides and herbicides that are sprayed on avocados. I never realized how many until I went onto a government website and it listed maybe a dozen different herbicides that are used, including some pretty famous or notorious ones. I made the decision at that point that I'm going to look for and only buy organic avocados. I had the idea
Yeah.
that avocados were kind of safe food. They have a thick skin and so forth. And I didn't think that they sprayed them that much. But from reading this government website, I came to the opposite conclusion that there's a lot of chemicals being sprayed onto these. And I don't know what goes on in Mexico or other Latin American countries where most of the U.S. avocado comes from. So I'm
Mhm.
going to look for a higher quality avocado than I've been normally buying.
And what about varieties? They didn't get into that in this paper, right? They weren't looking at one type of avocado versus the other.
No. Uh,
Okay.
Generally speaking, when we say avocado, we mean the Hass
Right.
variety. There
Right.
are others, but it's so overwhelming, the Hass type of
Hmm.
avocado.
Hmm. Well, this is a conundrum. On the one hand, I'm trying to bring more avocados into the house to eat them for my own health,
Yeah.
and I'll be waving them under the nose of my wife, who I'm going to be telling to try to avoid them. That's not right. Oh boy, I don't know what to do with this information, Dad. You really stumped me here. This
Yeah.
is, we've been talking about other things
But don't
that have
forget,
been that haven't been on a gender bias like this.
right, don't forget that this is an association. This isn't a causation. That all of
Hmm.
these studies that other than studies where you actually administer the food in question, but these are studies that show a correlation, as scientists call it, meaning two things happening at roughly the same time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's causing those things to happen. It could just
Right.
be something that also was going on that we're not aware of. And this
Well,
happens all
but
the
you said you
time.
had a theory that it was related to the pesticides. Well,
Correct.
why would the pesticides not affect men and only affect women?
Well, some of these pesticides are estrogen like, they're hormone like. They're called estrogen or hormone disruptors. This is a big concern, not just for cancer, but for many other things. And it's generally believed that cancers are accelerated by estrogen, and a form of estrogen has been used as a treatment for prostate cancer. We have another study from Jamaica that seems to indicate a great decrease in prostate cancer among men who eat avocados. So we have some reason to think that maybe some of this increase in breast cancer is being caused by these estrogen disruptors, but it's not at all certain. We may find in a year or two that this was just a scare. It could be.
Mm.
And they raise that possibility within the paper itself. They don't come out and use the word scare, but we've had a lot of health scares in America in particular. And so it may just be a statistical artifact of the study. As I say, there weren't all that many women eating avocados and getting breast cancer, so a few people could make the data go one way or the other, but I can't say for sure what it is. I
Well,
can just report what had happened.
I like your theory. I think it holds water. For me, if you're saying that they spray these avocados with pesticides that are estrogen disruptors,
Yeah.
just even the fact that they do anything to the body's systems or the body's production of its own chemistry seems like it could be a real problem.
I was thinking, well, this is going to be great, because when I found out that it had this 15% decrease that in cancer, that sounded about right. And then it's a 29 or 30% decrease in three very common kinds of cancer, including lung cancer. Well, that sounds great. So I thought this was another sort of olive oil study or something,
Right.
really wonderful. And then they hit you between the eyes with this thing about increase in women, increased breast
Yeah.
cancer, not cancer
Yeah.
overall, but increased breast cancer.
And they didn't look at organic versus non-organic. It was just avocados
They don't
that
mention it.
were studied.
Correct. They're not into mechanisms.
Well, oh, really? Right. Population groups.
Correct. That's their lane. They know their lane and they do it really well.
But I don't understand why women wouldn't see reduced cancer in these other organs
Yeah.
if it has a benefit to the health. I'm confused by it.
There were no site-specific decreases in cancer. In other words, women didn't have this benefit in terms of lung, bladder, colorectal. They didn't see it. When they reran the study with the younger women, there was a slight improvement or slight benefit, and the amount of that benefit was 7%. 7% less breast cancer in the younger women.
7% fewer incidents of breast cancer is not nothing, but it's also confusing.
Yeah.
Again, you got fewer incidents with younger women and much more with older women.
This may be why the paper hasn't gotten very much attention from the media, because it's confusing. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important for people to know that this happened. I'm sure if the results had been the same for women as for men, you'd be hearing about this all over the place.
Mm-hmm. So, did they offer a conclusion? What were their takeaways from their study?
They say overall, avocado consumption may be associated with reduced risk of total and some site-specific cancers in men. The positive association with breast cancer risk in the first study, the older women study, was not seen in the younger women study. That's their conclusion.
All right, so here's another paper. And where is this one from?
This one is from the University of the West Indies in Kingston, Jamaica. Not an institution that I'm familiar with. There's a lot of authors, which is a good sign. And I don't have the full paper. I have the abstract, but it's very interesting. It comes from 2012, so nothing like the previous paper that we were looking at. I don't know enough about the people who did this to say much about them, but this is a study that was done on 209 men who had newly diagnosed prostate cancer and another 226 men who didn't have any cancer but were attending the same urology clinic. So there are certain fatty acids that are derived from avocados. And when they looked at the blood composition of the people who had prostate cancer, they had a lot less of those fatty acids in their blood than the people who didn't have prostate cancer.
Oh, that's very significant.
Huge numbers. There was a 63% reduced incidence of prostate cancer with one of them, and even a 71% reduction in another kind of fatty acid. So it isn't a direct measure of prostate cancer, but it's pretty close to being that. And this would be in line with the other finding in sense of the benefit for men of eating avocados.
All right, so what were the conclusions of this study?
The conclusions were that whole blood and dietary MUFA, which is monounsaturated fatty acids, the kind found in avocado oil, but also found in olive oil, reduce the risk of prostate cancer. The association, they say, may be related to avocado intake, and high blood linolenic acid was directly related to prostate cancer. That's not the kind normally found in avocados. These associations warrant further investigation.
Well, I'll say.
But in the way of the world, this didn't get much follow-up or attention.
And it's obviously not at the level, as you said, of the previous study with 100,000 people, where this was only a few hundred.
Right.
But still, it was a genuine study
Yes.
with a number of authors, and it's in a peer-reviewed journal. So it's not something you could just dismiss with the wave of your hand. It's certainly worth looking at. And if I'm a man who's concerned about prostate cancer, which I think many men are, and should be, rightfully so, it seems like avocados should be on the menu.
Even guacamole.
I think the main thing is just to get them at the store, get some nice organic ones, and cut them open and eat them.
Yes.
And I remember we used to always have a little plant with toothpicks sticking out of it trying to grow in the windowsill.
Yes.
So we ate a number of avocados growing up in our household.
We did. I always liked it and cooked with it.
All right. Well, thanks for doing that research and bringing all of that to our attention. I think it's incredibly important for everyone to know the positives and the negatives. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Well, I just say on a personal note, I do intend to go on eating avocados. I'm going to switch from this day forward to buying organic avocados, and I would only use organic avocado oil as well.
As always, thanks for the education. We appreciate it. But for now, for the Moss Report, I'm Ben Moss. How are you healing today? Thank you for watching. We really appreciate all of the support. Please leave a like, a comment, subscribe to the channel, and visit themossreport.com. We wish you all the best for health and healing.